Once upon a time, two boys grew up playing hockey in the village of Terrace, British Columbia. One of them went on to play in the National Hockey League. The other became a comedian. Now, one flies planes and coaches youth hockey. The other is still a comedian and owns newsstands. This is their podcast, Enjoying Orange Slices with Jeff and Ian.
Hi, Jeff.
Hello.
What's going on?
Not much. I was out in the town last night.
Turn your camera.
Oh, hang on a second. I'm walking around. I'm so excited about today. I got all balled up. How's that? Is that better?
Why are you excited about today? Because my hair.
Yeah, actually, that T-shirt you're wearing. Hang on. Go like that. There we go.
Even blue.
Huh. You won't turn. Have I turned or you turned?
You've turned. No, you've turned.
Okay. You haven't turned yet.
I don't need to turn mine. I'm perfect.
Turned. So yeah. So big. Got to get all set up here. It's a big day. We're out in the town last night, getting ready for the big event today with our special guest. Yeah. For some reason, my camera won't turn. Let's do it this way.
Your turn just a second ago. There you go. Right there.
Yeah, don't but you're don't not move turned. From there.
Yeah, but don't worry about me. I'm turned.
Okay. There we go. Trying to leave.
I don't know if we should have a guest this week. Can't figure this.
No, I know. You know what? For some reason, my camera won't turn today. Anyways,
oh my goodness, my camera won't turn.
How's my lighting? It's good.
Your light. It's actually from the behind you. I don't know if you want to turn it around into it.
Yeah, I'm in a comfy chair though. Let me see.
Okay, stay comfy. Stay comfy. Gives you a little bit of a halo.
That's right. How's that better?
Lovely.
Beautiful. Yeah. So I went out to the Big Palms last night in Vegas here. I haven't been there for a long time, so it was kind of fun. And then had dinner at a place called Scotch 80, which is pretty cool. Had some interesting characters in there. So it was good. A lot of fun. And
what was that for? Just for fun, or what was that for? Just for kicks,
we just we won a I don't know if you call it winning a silent auction. I think you just
paid for it at a silent auction.
Paid for it at a silent auction and raised money for a great cause. So went down there last night, and I got thinking. I was like, man, there's a lot's gone on since we talked last week in the NHL. So we're going to try and bring some people in to help us make sense of it this week.
Well, this week, I would say this is probably the last one we do before Christmas as well. So maybe ever, maybe the last one of 2025, maybe.
Yeah.
Our guest today is Doug MacLean, an ex-NHL coach, ex-NHL general manager, and he's just would you say he's an insider?
Oh yeah, he's been way inside. He did show for years with Millard, Nick Kiprios on Sportsnet that they used to do at noon. Hockey show, real character. He's been on panels. Incredible amount of experience. I don't want to give him too much credit because he's going to probably rip us to shreds today. But real character, a lot of fun. And anytime you ever hear him speak, it's pretty hilarious. So he's definitely, as we say, a character of the game.
A character of the game. Do you know him from when you played?
No, know of him, don't know him.
Oh, so this will be new for you. This will be this will be exciting for you.
How about this? Before we go, I got a bird that's, I guess, befriended me. Every time I'm in one room in the house, he flies up against the window. So either he's saying hi or I'm on his property. I can't tell which.
Well, I've got 5 squirrels in the backyard because Carey Ann came up with this great idea that she was going to empty the bird bath out of water and just fill it with bird seed. Not one bird, just five squirrels just in there, just eating seeds, just throwing them around. It's pretty crazy.
That's awesome.
We went from 5 pounds of bird seed to 25 pounds of squirrel.
That's perfect. We're gonna have some squirrel for Christmas. They're fun. Great. They're always fun. Yeah. So good.
Great. Well, let's bring our guest.
Sounds good.
Okay. What's Orange Slices mean, boys? That's kind of it's like spitting chiclets, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. No, it's the level of hockey that I got to that we only got oranges in between periods. So and it's way better than Gatorade will ever be. It's an orange slice because your mom cut it and gave it to you for in between periods. So that's what it's all about.
When I was playing for the Montreal Junior Canadiens in the 70s, I remember between periods, Roger Bedard was this famous major or junior coach with the Junior Canadiens when he had Pro and Martin, and all of a sudden I end up there. And between periods, he was drilling oranges at me because he thought I was that bad. He'd take them off the table and throw them at me.
That's funny. Getting smacked by oranges. Oh my God.
Smacked by oranges. And then I met him years later when I was coaching in the NHL. And I went over to introduce myself to him at the Montreal Forum. And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm with St. Louis." "Oh, what are you in the marketing department?" I said, "No, I'm a coach. I'm a coach." Anyway, that's how much faith he had in me.
We all need that person in our life that just keeps us grounded, right?
Hey, so Doug, how did you end up in did you grow up around the Montreal area? I thought you were the back on the east coast, way out in the Maritimes.
I was playing junior B, I guess it was, in Summerside PEI, and I got scouted to go to Montreal. So I remember, I'll never forget, it was 1971, and I got on a plane to fly to Montreal. First time I was ever on an airplane in my life. I think I was 16, and I flew to Montreal. And I think, what in hell am I doing here? Seriously. But anyway, it was a great. I was there a couple of years. It was a great experience, and it was fun. It was a great experience, but it was really tough. It was really tough, and I'll never forget my last year I played Montreal. I went up against the boards and I pushed this big guy into the boards, and I thought, maybe I shouldn't have done that. And he turns around, it was John Wensick, and he broke my nose in 3 places. And I had a girl at the game. It was my first date with her. And I said, after the game, I come on, I said, "Is there any way you could drive me up to the Montreal General Hospital and take my car back out to Dorval for me?"
Oh my
so
God.
that was the last time I ever saw her. But bizarre, I was coaching the Florida Panthers, and Ronnie Harris was one of our scouts. And this was how many years later, from the time I was 19 or 18 till I was, 40. And Ronnie Harris was one of our scouts in Florida. He goes into Dorval to get our check cashed at the counter with a teller. And the teller said, "Oh, I dated your coach, Doug MacLean." And oh my God, that's the next time I've heard from her since, So anyway, I said to Ronnie, "How'd she look?" He said, "I think you made the right decision."
She looks like she broke her nose in 3 places.
Exactly. But anyway, I saw John Wensick being interviewed the other day on Brett Hall's podcast, and I sent it just to put a tweet out. It's great to see John Wensick. Last time I saw him, he broke my nose in 3 places. But anyway, fun. So anyway, that's my playing career.
I got a question about you flying in from PEI. So it's 1971. How did they treat you guys at that time? Was somebody waiting for you at the airport? Do you have to figure out how to get downtown in Montreal? Like what can you tell us about?
No, it was really good. I mean, I flew in there, and the chief scout, the guy named Eric Taylor, was there. He was a famous Montreal Junior Canadian scout, and he was with the Habs organization forever. So he's at the airport to pick me up, take me. You go to a billet. It was really tough because it was 8,000 people in Summerside and Montreal. It was a big step to play there. So it was. I can't ever say it wasn't the greatest experience. And I really, Ian Turnbull was on our team that year. Andre Saint Laurent was on our team. We had a great group of guys, and it was decent players. So it's funny that you don't run into them, and then all of a sudden I'm coaching the NHL, and they say, "Is that the same guy that played for us with the Junior Canadians?" So it was just kind of weird how it went,
How did you feel putting that Canadians? I'm assuming Junior Canadians wearing the same uniforms. Like, how did that feel putting that uniform on as a kid coming from PEI? Because on Hockey Night in Canada, we either saw the Canadians or the Leafs, right? So you grew up watching these guys. Was that pretty crazy? Were you practicing in the same kind of area as the Canadians, or have any interaction with them?
Actually, we were right next door. Our dressing room was right next door to the Canadians' dressing room. We used the same weight room. I mean, they'd work out in the morning. We'd practice in the afternoon after school. But it was just, we played in the Montreal Forum. We had the identical uniforms. The first year we were in the Ontario Hockey League, and then the second year we went into the Quebec League. And a little bit different, but it was still at the Montreal Forum. Habs were next door to us. Every Saturday night we'd get to go to the games, and sit there and watch Frank Mahovich and Peter Mahovich. And that was when they were really, really a good team. So it was a great, great experience. It really was. I was homesick as hell, but it was a great experience,
How'd you deal with that homesickness? It blows me, because Jeff and I grew up in the middle of nowhere, northern British Columbia. You're out in PEI. You go to this big center. I was a pansy. I was just like, I'm not leaving my mom.
No, I know.
You guys.
I found it really tough. And I found the school really tough. And you know what? When I left Montreal, I finished. I think I finished grade 11 or whatever, and I went to play in Brockville, Ontario, for my last year junior, because Montreal were going to trade me to Drummondville, and I said I'm not going to Drummondville. So anyway, they sold my card that was called into Brockville, so I ended up in Brockville, and I quit school. I got a job working as a carpenter's helper, a bricklayer assistant, and quit school, and then the following year. That was February I went there, and I didn't go to school till, the rest of that year. And then I went into the high school the next fall and said, hey, will you let me in on probation, in grade 12. So that's how I got back into school. So I was sort of a bit of a lost soul at that time, But anyway,
right.
It was a great experience.
That's awesome.
Did you have anybody come out with you from, because when I left, so I turned 16 and I left to go play junior. But I was billeted in with another guy that I played my minor hockey with, Terry Zapperzan. And so Zapp and I were billeted at the same place when we went to play in the Western League in junior. Did you have anybody like to kind of cling on, I wouldn't say cling on to, but someone that you shared some commonality with? Because
I did. The first year, a kid came from Summerside. He was a younger guy. Dwight Grady was his name, who ended up being a town cop in Summerside. And I thought he was a pure NHLer. And he got to Montreal, and he was a young kid. And he was living with me, and he stayed a month or so and then went back home. But that was really it. And it was, it was tough. It really was tough. You enjoy it because you're playing hockey, but it was a long 1,000 miles from home or whatever it was. And it was just different. But once I got to Brockville, it became terrific, really enjoyed it, and end up, I had a chance to go back to Hull Major Junior and to Kingston Major Junior. And I said, no, I'm going to stay and get my grade 12 and get my high school and get back on track here a little bit instead of being a bum, So it was kind of funny. But that's when I met Brian Murray. I was playing in Brockville, and Brian Murray was the coach of Pembroke, and we played against each other. And I was on the All-Star team, and Brian was the All-Star coach. And I played in the All-Star game against Sudbury, and I had the Islanders and St. Louis invited me to their camp from that year. But Brian Murray, out of the blue, I get a Hockey Canada scholarship, which those days was a full ride to any Canadian university, And Acadia University phoned me, and UPEI phoned me, and St. Mary's phoned me. And I said, how did I get this? And they said, Brian Murray recommended you, who was the coach in Pembroke at the time. So that was the first connection I ever had with Brian, and ended up working with him for 10 years in the NHL. So pretty fluky,
Which did you take? Which
I went to UPEI, and I graduated, and I ended up teaching high school in PEI for 7 years. And then I went back and did a master's at the University of Western Ontario in educational psychology. And I ended up working with the London Knights part-time. I'd written a letter to Don Boy, the coach of the London Knights, saying, hey, I'm going to London to do my master's. I coached in PEI, I was teaching high school and coaching in PEI. And he gave me a volunteer assistant job at the Knights. And I finished that year, and I got the job at UNB as a head coach because of the experience with London. And I was in London one year, or I should say in UNB one year. And then I got Jacques Martin, who I had worked hockey schools with in Brockville and all around that area, got the St. Louis job, and he hired me as assistant coach. So it was just bizarre luck, all the way around, from coaching PEI Junior League to UNB to getting a job in the NHL. It was just pretty fluky, to be quite honest. And then Brian, when I got fired in St. Louis after a couple of years, Brian Murray phones me out of the blue and said, "Hey, I want you to come to Washington and interview me. I remember you from playing junior." And I thought, oh man, this is pretty bizarre. And then I was with Brian for 10 years. So it's kind of fluky,
So so you left junior and then you kind of went on to university. So you had a little gap in there when you left the game to be coming back into the game, went and got your education and then carried on. And you lost track of Brian Murray for like 7 years and then he calls you again out of the blue?
No, what happened was when I got the scholarship and went to UPEI, and I was playing hockey at UPEI, and Brian was in the Centennial Cup and he was coaching Rockland Nationals and I was in Charlottetown. So I went to the game and I went up and introduced myself to him. And we talked. And he said, "Oh, yeah, remember you there." Then when I got the UNB job, I go to the draft in Montreal and I meet Brian at the draft and shake hands. And he said, "Oh, yeah." So we had a chat then. Then when I got the St. Louis job, I meet him at, in the morning skates and stuff when we're playing Washington. And then when we got fired in Washington, I got a call the day after I got fired by Brian. "Hey, come to Washington. I want to interview you." So it was kind of luck, you know what I mean? Meeting Brian Murray, basically made my career, if the truth was known. Jacques Martin gave me my first chance, but Brian Murray really made my career.
It's luck, but it's also going and thanking somebody that gave you an opportunity. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like who knows where it goes if you don't go up and thank them for that opportunity.
Yeah. It's funny. I just finished a book. I just sent it into Simon & Schuster on Monday, and it's a new book coming out. It'll be out next October, and it's A Day in the Life of an NHL General Manager is what the chaotic life of an NHL GM. But anyway, and I was finished the book last week. It had to be in December 15th to Simon & Schuster, and the guy said, my ghostwriter said, "Is there somebody you want to dedicate it to?" And I said, "Yeah, there is." So inside the front cover, you'll see it says "For Brian Murray" on the front page, on the cover, inside the cover. And he said, "Well, do you want to say things about him?" I said, "No, because Brian would not want anything said. He wasn't that type of guy. He said he would be happy that his name is there and that's all he would want, instead of the flowery commentary. I had in the book that he was my mentor and stuff, but, so just kind of fluky. But anyway, I lucked out.
That's interesting. I'm going to go back a little bit from you going from your hometown to Montreal. Is there anything that you think should change in the game that hasn't been changed in that for kids going from these small towns to the big towns?
You know what? I don't know. I mean, it was a scary, scary experience, to go there at 16 and,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't know that there's anything. The Billet family was a good family. The school was really challenging. I had a really hard time in school, and I was, a good student, but I had a real tough time, and there was really no guidance from that perspective. And I ended up quitting school, and luckily, I got to Brockville and got my head straightened out, or I would have been who knows what, I'll never forget. When I went to Brockville, it was in February, and I was at a billet, and at the end of we're sitting down the last dinner at my billets, and they said, "Okay, this is your last meal. You're paid till the end of April, and you have to leave tonight." And I'm thinking, like, what? I'm thinking this is so. I have a car. I get out and get in my car, and I've got my kit bag in the back of the car, and I'm driving down Park Street in Brockville, and I'm essentially homeless. I had $5 in my pocket. And I'm thinking, where the hell am I going to sleep tonight? And I pull in to one of the owners of the team. His name was Ray and Polly Levia. I pull into their driveway and I knock on the door and I said, "Look, I know I don't have any place to sleep tonight. Can I stay at your place?" And they said, sure. So I was there 7 years, I ended up there. I'd go back every summer from college, and I'd work there. And Ray and Polly, both of them have passed in the last few years, but both of them were in my 24-year career in the NHL, they were at every home opener. I brought them in for every home opener of every team I was with. So we stayed in touch, and it was like they saved my life, if the truth was known, you know. So it's kind of weird.
So like when you left home, like, and I think it's the same for a lot of kids, that they just know you're kind of like a headless vector to a certain degree, because they're bringing you in to play hockey, but the rest of it, there wasn't a lot of guardrails for kids. And you talked about school, a lot of, you know, I think it's gotten better now, but I think there's a lot of people that, you know, they go and play, and that's the focus of the team you're coming to play for. Not so much back then. It wasn't so much about your schooling, or even if you were injured or were nursing something, right? They were, you were a commodity, and you know, you were to be at practice at 1:00, and then the game that night at 7. And do you think it's changed that much, Brian? Like, I mean, you still keep in touch. You're around the game a ton. Do you think there's some guardrails to help these kids? Because
I think for the most, you know, most major junior organizations are pretty solid organizations, and anything I dealt with or heard that they're pretty solid on top of things with respect to education. And I think now, even with the NCAA rules changing and the eligibility of major juniors to be able to play, I think it's you know, it's going to become even stronger, because major junior kids now have that great opportunity to go to U.S. college, you know, that we didn't have. You know, you lose your eligibility the minute you sign a major juniors card. So I think it's probably good. I would say it's better. And it wasn't the team's fault, to be quite honest. It was probably more my fault than it was the team's. You know what I'm saying? You know, just sort of your head spinning, because you're trying to make the team, and you're trying to survive on the team, and you're trying to be there, you know, because of your couple bad games, you're down to the junior B team. It you know, and I was a bubble guy, and it was pressure, but I can't say I'd blame the team for any of it. I really wouldn't, you know. The coach throwing oranges I didn't like, but other than that, it was fine. You know?
We just slice ours up.
No chance of scurvy. No chance of scurvy before you had my team.
Exactly.
The question I have now, Doug, is like, we've got all these top end junior kids coming in that they can get this nil money in college. We've got top end prospects going to these college teams. Do you see a place where the major junior leagues, which we came out of, become a bit of a feeder for the U.S. college program? And where do you think the NHL, like the NHL's kind of got to be getting behind you know, and kind of help steward some of this stuff for, you know, the Canadian junior leagues, don't you think? And even the USHL?
Look, I think it can be good for the major A guys. And I was always bothered by the fact that, you know, when I was a GM and even in coaching, when a major junior kid came, so let's say a higher pick, you know, first, second, third round pick, or whatever the case may be, that came in and was on the bubble to make your team, you know, and what you have as a kid is you've got a 3-year entry level to make it, essentially 3 years to make it, you know, and you know, most kids spend a couple of years in the minors. So I thought, I really, and I was always bothered by the fact that U.S. college kids get an opportunity after the USHL. They can go and play U.S. college, and they get 4 more years at, you know, most of them don't stay the top guys, but 3 years. They get 3 more years of development at that level versus the major A guys. So I see it as an advantage, because I think some kids now will leave major junior. We're seeing it every day, signing. Then they get an opportunity to go to U.S. college versus going to the East Coast League versus going to the American League. They can now go to a U.S. college and play a couple of years there, 2-3 years, maybe stay all 4, get their degree and move on in life, or get a couple more years of good development. So I see it as a bit of a pretty positive thing for major junior. I really do, you know, for the kids, not the superstars. The superstars are always going to find their way to the NHL, you know, for the most part. But a lot of the bubble guys need more development, you know, than their 19-year year. We're going to see a lot more overage guys stay, I think, and play overage. So I think it's going to be good for development. I really do.
Yeah.
So you You think that the guys are going to be able to, that may not have made the league, may be able to make the league because they've been able to stay in college?
Because they get a couple more years of good development and at a good level.
Interesting.
I just think it is. And because I always, there's a lot of guys after their entry level deals are over, they disappear. A lot of guys do disappear. You come out of junior and you get that 3-year entry level. You may go back to junior for the first year, then turn pro, and you get a couple of years and then they disappear. So I think it may give them that extra bit of development that some of them probably need,
It's funny because the 20-year-olds, the overage and junior, back when I played, I remember first year in Kelowna, Jeff Fenton, great guy.
Yeah.
He could have been a hockey player on the cover of GQ magazine. This guy had it all. But as a 20-year-old, he was like, and he was a really mature guy. I mean, obviously we were all 16, 17 coming in, but then he could play, but then it was kind of like, there was no real path after that for him.
That's right.
And this was a great guy. He was the captain of our team. I think of a guy like Jeff, and to this day, and to your point. So, there's a great, now there's an opportunity for a late bloomer or someone that maybe kind of slipped through the cracks a little bit. Let me ask you this. So we got these kids coming in, like where it's kind of getting reshuffled here in the major college or major junior and NCAA. Yeah. What's your take on a kid? We could come up with a couple kids, but there's this kid Ian and I talked about this year that Vancouver had. I didn't know if you'd heard him. Coots is his name, and he played the first month, maybe 2-3 weeks with Vancouver, but they sent him back to Seattle. And the last time we looked, he just lit it up. Like, do you see, like, where's the happy place where you don't kill your junior team, but we keep these kids developing? Because I'm sure he'll go play for Canada in the World Juniors, but he's outgrown, I think, the Western Hockey League, Canadian Major Junior. Where are you on that? How many kids could we maybe slide up to the American League in these organizations? Or where do you see that?
That's going to be the next thing, is that they're going to have the opportunity to send the 19-year-olds to the American League, which we could never do, So that's going to be the next steps. You can send your 19-year-old to the American League. I would prefer, maybe I'm wrong in this, but I really don't think there's anything wrong with a guy going back to major junior and really being a star. I would rather the American League, and this, the American League's a tough league for young guys. It's really, you got a lot of quality veterans there. It's not an easy league to play in. So I think that, sending a guy back to major junior, even if he's tearing it up. I remember I drafted Brulé, which was maybe, one of the biggest mistakes in my career, but I watched this kid and I watched him a lot. He was Sid Crosby of the West. He was an amazing star. And we drafted him in the first round. And, he came up, started out with camp. We sent him back to Vancouver. And then I've read for 10 years that I should have sent him back to junior. And I thought I did send him back. I did send him back to junior, and he went to the Memorial Cup, led them to the Memorial Cup, was MVP of the Memorial Cup in Moncton, and just a star. But he never made it. He played 250 games, which is all right. But the guy. So I've been ripped for years on this one because I was sitting at the draft, number 6 pick of the draft. We were sure that Montreal we had Kopitar in the 5-6 range. Okay. And we're sitting at the table, and Pierre Dorion leans over the Montreal table, and he said, "We're taking the goal." We thought they were taking Brulé for sure, and we were going to take Kopitar. So anyway, they lean over and said, "We're taking the goalie." And of course, that was Carey Price they took, who most teams had Carey Price in the second round. Most teams had him in the second round. And I'll never forget Pierre Maguire, the genius that he is, goes nuts on TSN saying, "I can't believe Montreal didn't take Brulé. Have they lost their minds? This is a pick out of nowhere, Carey Price." And I'm thinking, how did they not take Brulé? So anyway, then years later, he's ripping me for taking Brulé, So, but anyway, so Kopitar, we don't take Kopitar, and of course, Montreal. The next pick after us was Chicago. They take Jack Skilly. Brian Murray takes Brian Lee. And somebody took Setaguchi, and Vancouver took the Moncton kid that was a big defenseman that was killed in the motorcycle accident. Finally, he goes 11 or 12 to L.A., Kopitar. And it has not stopped the vicious heat I've taken for taking Brulé over Kopitar. And I said, what about the other 5 guys that geniuses that didn't take him out? How come nobody ever mentions them? So anyway,
you're a lightning rod, bud.
But Brulé was a guy that, oh man, I mean, he was that good. He was a stud as a junior. He really was. And I still talk to him on text, and the kid's back running a hockey program in Vancouver, and he's done well. But I just, he was a terrific kid, and I'm devastated that he didn't get an opportunity to be a star. People thought he was like the Steve Yzerman of the West. He was that good, But anyway, those are the things that happen in the draft, And kids develop at different times, and it's you just when you're drafting 18-year-olds, it's really tough. It's really.
Do you think if he had been able to go to college, would you have sent him that direction before he came into you, or how would? What do you think?
You know what? In those days, you never even thought of it because he was your first pick. You bring him in, and we had taken Nash, I think, the year before, and I'm thinking, maybe a couple of years before. But you just think when you're taking the first pick and their top 5 pick. They're bubble guys to make your team, or you send them back to junior. I never would have envisioned him going to college. He wasn't a college type kid at that time.
Well, just think this way too, Doug, is you only have another 50 games to have to hear about Kopitar unless they go on a run and he decides maybe one more year, right?
God, he's retiring. Thank you. So I'm on Kiprios's podcast there a couple of years ago, and Kipper, we talk like Berkey's always a guy when I would be on Sportsnet with Berkey. What do you mean Kopitar? None of us had him in the top 10. None of us had him in the top 10. I said, yeah, well, I wish you'd tell the media in Columbus that. But anyway, Kippy says to me one day, what do you think it cost you to take, because you took Brulé over Kopitar? And I said, Kippy, I would say it probably cost me about $30 million personally, because if I would have taken Kopitar, I'd still be a GM in the NHL. Ooh. So that's what it probably cost me. It was a kind of a costly decision.
I can't believe you text with him still.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, when you need to feel good about yourself, Doug, you just you pick up the phone or text Kipper, eh? Okay, well, we talk about Brulé and Kopi.
No, Brulé. He texts with Brulé. I'm like, I'd be sending Brulé a -30 every so often.
Anyway,
who's your best draft? Like, I mean, they always love to rub it in on something that a bunch of other people missed too. The cannon that was coming, but
you know what? The Nash was our best deal. We went into that draft pick. Columbus is a franchise. They're celebrating their 25th year in the league. Have never won the lottery once, it's. I talked about Stevie Y in Detroit, 9 years not making the playoffs under Stevie's reign, and they have never won the lottery. They've never even moved up in the lottery. So the lottery is a real problem for lousy teams. When you were lousy in the old days, you finished last, you got the first pick, and you look at how the Islanders built their team, and Detroit built their team with Yzerman and Lids. They got lucky on a lot of their drafts, but that's how they built, was through the draft. Now you can't count on building through the draft. So it really is frustrating. But we were third going into the draft in 2000 or whatever year it was. I'm not sure. 2002, I think it was, in Toronto. 2003 maybe. And we were third pick, and so we ended up. I ended up making a deal at 2 a.m. with Dudley to move up to the number 1 pick. So we got Nash, because I was really nervous. Philly were trying to move up. Vancouver were trying to move up to get him, and I knew Bouwmeester was the other big name guy. So, and we didn't. We liked Bouwmeester, but we really wanted Rick Nash. So anyway, we were lucky and made the trade to move up and get him, and it was really lucky, but. We made the trade with Rick Dudley, who's a quality guy and a great guy to deal with. And I said, Duds, he said, okay, here's the deal, Doug. we'll both just flip picks. I'll give you my first pick this year, and next year I have the right to flip with you. Them thinking I was going to be worse than Florida the next year, you know. So then we go the next year, and we're 3-4 in the lottery the next year, us in Florida. So they would have moved up one spot with flipping picks. Florida win the lottery, so I didn't have to give them anything. So we made the deal for Nash, and in essence, we didn't have to pay anything for it because they won the lottery. So they moved to number one anyway. So it was kind of fluky. But anyway, Nasher was by far the best. But I had a lot of later guys, like Chris Russell was a third-round pick that played 1,000 games for, in the NHL. He was a character kid. Mark Mathot was a 7th-round pick. Derek Dorsett was a 7th-round pick out of Medicine Hat that had a really good, Jared Bowl is assistant with Columbus now. He was a 5th or 6th round pick. So I had Adam McQuaid was a 2nd-round pick of ours who had a good career. So, I mean, a lot of later guys that did well, but my first picks were my problem. I mean, Pascal Leclerc was a 1st-round pick, 8th overall. He was an excellent goalie. I thought he'd be a franchise goaltender, and he ended up blowing out his knee and never really recovered, and had a shortened career, but a good career. Steve Mason we took in the 3rd round, and he ended up winning the Memorial Cup, winning the World Junior, and actually getting Columbus into the playoffs for the first time. So, good picks, but when you're a GM, you got to hit with your number 1 picks. That's the key. And if you don't hit with your number 1s, that's where you get ripped,
How do you like getting ready for the draft? Want to talk a little bit about Columbus too, but getting ready for the draft, Doug, like how do the nerves, like just walk us through the season? You're always watching people, but you got people out watching all these kids you're going to get drafted. Like as you walk through the season as a GM, like there's a lot on your plate. When does the draft really start to come into focus for you as a general manager? And you're like, hey, these are the kids that we've got circled. Here's where they might end up falling. Like, how does that, and how do the nerves, how do you handle that?
Really, what happens with the draft is every morning, the first thing I did when I would show up at the office at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, every scout's reports would come in on my computer. We're on RinkNet at the time, and so everybody with the scout would finish his game, he'd do his report, and then I would have it on my computer. So I'd go read through the junior reports, which there could be 3 or 4. There could be a couple of pro reports from the American League or the NHL. I'd read my European guys. Just read the reports, so at least I knew who they were talking about. You know what I'm saying? Just to have a feel, because as a GM, you don't get out that often to see them. And the scouts, I would go out for like a 10-day run with my chief scout, and we'd go and look at a bunch of 1st, 2nd round picks. And they hate it because they see the guy 10 times and I see him once, and I really like him, so they try to keep the GMs away from it, to be quick. We take all the heat for the picks, but you're really, at the end of the year, you'll go out, if say you're picking in the top 3, you'll go and look at the top 3 guys, or you'll always go to the prospects game. The main thing is done your January meeting, you do your first list. And then in April, May, you do your 2nd list, and it's your 100. You go into the draft with 100 players on your list, and I know of them as a GM. I might have seen 30 players play, but I know all of them, what they're about, because of just sitting in the meetings and discussions. So the draft was just. I went to 24 of them in my career, and they were a special time. I was in LA this year at the draft, which was the telephone draft. It was brutal compared to and you've been to the draft. It's such a great event. Event. So you weren't nervous. You were always a little worried who you were going to get, and is this guy going to slide to us? But there's so much now that it's luck is such a big part of it. It really is. The lucky. It's funny. You think about Chevy in Winnipeg desperately wanted a kid. I forget his name. He plays in Peterborough. He played in Peterborough. Kraus, and he ended up playing in Phoenix, and he's still in. I think he's probably still in Utah.
Yep.
Lawson Kraus, and Chevy wanted Lawson Kraus really, really bad. I think he had the 7th pick of the draft or something. Wanted him so bad. anyway, no, I'm not sure if he had the 17th. He might have had the 17th. But anyway, Kraus went early and was a bit of a surprise. And so he has to settle, Chevy has to settle for Kyle Connor. Well,
Yeah.
In another draft, he wanted a big defenseman, a Gauthier kid, and Philly stepped up and took him. And Chevy was really disappointed, and he had to settle for Morrissey. So you know what?
Yeah.
Those are two of Chevy's, not that Chevy's, I think he's a solid guy and a solid hockey guy. Luck's a part of it. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah.
Luck's a part of it, but also having a second choice that's ready to go. Speaking of second choice, this guy wants to come in and say hi to you. He's just
what do we got? A special guest on top of special guest?
Special guest on
Someone's
top of
coming
special
in to
guest.
take over. Take the helm from you here, Doug. Hang on. He's got to get his thing off mute.